I am here to welcome you to our Spring 2022 series, backed by popular demand, Gather, Make, Sustain. This series celebrates Indigenous artists, cultural workers, and land-based practitioners as they gather materials from the natural world, make meaning through art and cultural work, and sustain traditional knowledge systems. Today's program is supported by generous donors to the Friends of the Haffenreffer Museum. Subsistence is a foundational cornerstone of cultural and linguistic practice for many Indigenous people worldwide. It is fundamental to maintaining human connection to the natural world, and rights and access to natural materials for subsistence remain challenging to Indigenous sovereignty and the health and well-being of Indigenous people. Tonight, please help us welcome Mashantucket Pequot and Narragansett educator and subsistence practitioner, Nakai Northup, as he elucidates on traditional food sources and harvesting on Pequot and Narragansett lands to preserve and protect natural resources to promote culture, lifeways, and food sovereignty for future generations. Nakai Northup serves as the head of education at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center, where he spent more than 10 years developing educational programs on Eastern Woodland tribal history and culture for visitors of all ages. Nakai is completing his degree in business management at Mitchell College and is the vice chair of the tribe's Natural Resources Protection Committee. He also serves as a board member of the Stonington Historical Society. An avid hunter and fisherman, Nakai is a frequent speaker and lecturer on historic preservation, environmental, Indigenous activism, food sovereignty, and teaching traditional Eastern Woodland histories and lifeways. Having both Mashantucket Pequot and Narragansett bloodlines, Nakai has spent his entire life on both reservations and is a passionate advocate and activist for Native American rights. With a strong love for his tribal community and as a father of two beautiful children, Nakai is dedicated to preserving tribal histories and passing down cultural traditions to younger generations. And please, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Nakai Northup.
Hello. I'm just grateful and thankful for this opportunity. I look forward to speaking to everyone today. This is a subject that I'm really passionate about. So anytime I get to speak about, providing for the community and being out in the woods and hunting and fishing, I'm always really excited about it. So I'm going to jump right in for the sake of time. And this very first slide that you're seeing here is from a couple of years back, and this is with my first child who's 6 now, and we're out and we harvest, and she comes in the woods with me now, and you'll see some pictures of her now as we continue to go through. But to me, one of the especially if I was able to see a buck, it always got me excited as a child. And I was fortunate enough for the family that I grew up in to be brought in the woods a lot and spend a lot of time in the woods, even without a weapon or without going hunting, just going and sitting and listening to the woods and the stories that the woods have to tell. So that's something that I was huge in passing on to my children, and it's something that I love to pass on in my community. So here you can see my daughter right with me, and she watches the whole process from when I bring the animal home to when it's on our plate or in our freezer. So we can go to the next slide. And here she is now. She's 6 years old, and she gets up when I wake her up at 5 in the morning to go get in the woods. And, teaching our younger generations to be the next stewards of the land and to protect this land is the ultimate goal, because no resource is unlimited, and everything has a limit, and we have to do our best for conserving, and we have to take our time to teach them to survive. And this is something that I love to see that my children are passionate about now, and I try to get other community members involved, because there's really nothing more rewarding than putting your own food on the table and then being able to tell the story of that food while you're eating that meal and you're providing nourishment for your family and loved ones. We can go to the next slide. And here we are again. This is this year. And this year we dabbled more into waterfowl, which traditionally played a very big role for the fats that these animals offer. Duck fat and geese fat are a prized resource just as much as the meat that you get from these animals. And taking the time to, learn their migration patterns. And with ducks and geese, although today you see them in football fields and at the parks and they just walk right up to you, wild ducks and geese are very skittish. So being able to stay still, find the right spots, and then working on calling has been a lot of practice this year, to say the least. But it was a successful hunting season, and that's really what has got me hooked into hunting and fishing. Is you really have to take the time to learn about what you're going to harvest. You have to know their traits and what they like to do and what they like to eat, body language, and that will really help you excel. People always ask me, how am I so successful when it comes to hunting and fishing? And it seems like I'm always coming back with something. And that's just off of time. If you put time and effort into just about anything, you'll be good at it after a while. And that's one thing I always stress. People may have more expensive gear or nicer stuff, but if you put the time in, you'll always get rewarded. We can go to the next slide. And from that goose comes a meal like this. And this is what it's all about for me, is the meal at the end, because eating a traditional diet is something that I highly stress. Eating, the foods that your grandmas were cooking, and getting away from all these processed foods that, may be convenient when you're tired after a long day of work. And, you can just go grab something and throw it in the oven and it'll be done quick for the family. But, that nourishment and that reconnection to the land, eating foods from where you're, eating a lot of fast foods and eating what was convenient and cheap, to, really taking the time to say, is this what I want for myself? And, studying and learning. And, most disease starts in the gut. And if you look historically, one of the main ways of genocide was to take away food sources, was to take away resources. You see, the biggest version we see of it is in the plains and out west with the bison, with, the mass killing of millions upon millions of bison. And then in return, these people get flour, cheese, lard, and from that created fry bread, which today in Indian country, people praise fry bread like it's a beautiful thing, but that's a struggle food, because they took away, your steak, they took away your prime rib. And so I always stress to people to, try wild game, try foods from around your areas, because that reconnects you with the land that you're on, that reconnects you with your ancestors and your people. And personally, for me, I started eating a paleo diet about a year ago, and it really helped me physically. It helped me mentally, but it helped me spiritually. It helped me feel more connected to my people. It helped me gain a new role in my community, where I help provide traditional meals and foods for my people, where, it's not as common today for a lot of us. And like I mentioned, it's easier for them to go to the store and get something. So any chance I get where I can, donate meat to the community, or if I'm able to cook for the community and let them try foods that our ancestors were eating, and, see their reaction, like, this is really good, and enjoy it, that's worth it for me. And that's worth all the hours and the cold and sitting there pretending to be a bush. We'll go to the next slide. Another great example. This is from this past season, a nice buck right on reservation. And what you can't see in this picture is the support team I have around me. And I'm fortunate enough to have a really big family, but my cousins, whenever I'm able to get a deer, and this one in particular doesn't look too big in this picture, but this deer was over 200 pounds, and it was one of my first of the season. And the first one of the season always lets me know how out of shape I am when it comes time to drag it. So calling family and having them be able to rally around and come help you. And what's important about this is always giving thanks. We don't harvest from the land. We don't harvest from the seas. Whether we're harvesting a deer or whether we're gathering sassafras or we're picking sumac berries, we're always giving thanks for what we're taking. And that's a huge component that I always stress to my children is that, like I mentioned, no resource is unlimited. And I'm sorry, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I think we can hear you now. And I think we'll have you turn off your video just to make sure we can hear you well.
Okay, I'll drop the video. Good.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
All right. This is my son. And, you know, seeing this from a young age, I think is very important because I want him to know where his food comes from. And so he's always very curious and eager and watching. And he's 2 years old now. This is around the age where my father was, you know, introducing me to the same practices and, you know, being there to watch it all through. He's not paying attention the whole time, of course, and he's running around and he's playing and getting into everything like a boy would. But, you know, spending that time and having that interaction and letting them see the process through and through. And he's 2 years old, but now when we're driving around, if we see a deer or we see anything, he's right there and he's ready and he knows that, hey, that could be dinner for me, and relates that. All right, we can go to the next slide. And like I said before, this is what it's all about, the harvest. And this is why you put all those hours in the woods is the meat. And this is a resource that, you know, it's so high in iron and it has all these different vitamins that really help you sustain yourself. My wife, when I first met her, she had never had venison. She had never had deer meat, and she was actually highly anemic. And I started to give her deer meat, telling her it was steak at first. And when she found out, she may have been a little upset, but she was like, she couldn't complain because it tasted good. And within a few months, her levels were regulated and she was on track. And once she saw that, she's been game for everything ever since. There's nothing that I can not, you know, put past her. She's all for it and supports, you know, harvesting our own food. And that's something I'm a huge advocate for. So taking the time to, you know, make it look pretty and taste good is a fun task. So processing has become huge in our household. We have an old fashioned meat grinder still, the old cast iron one with the crank. And my daughter has taken on that role of the meat grinder now, which is awesome. And this is all free range, all on the res, where I do most of my harvesting between the Mashantucket Pequot Reservation and the Narragansett Reservation. We can go to the next slide. All right, now we're getting into some other things other than venison. Mushrooms, by far, late summer, early fall is one of my favorite times of the year. After a rainy day like today, where it was a little bit rainier earlier on, and then it got nice out in the fall, I'll definitely be in the woods because mushrooms will sprout up all over the place. And we put our pack baskets on and we go for hikes all the time. And this is a great resource because just the vast abundance. In single days, we've come home with 100 pounds of mushrooms of different varieties, from chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, beef steaks, that just goes on. And I love to feed these to people because sometimes we'll be driving down the road and we'll see like a nice mushroom in someone's yard. And I'm the person to go pull in their yard and knock on their door and say, hey, do you want that mushroom? And 9 times out of 10 they let me take it, and if so, I always bring some back to them. And when you do that, you typically don't ever get that mushroom ever again, because if you cut it the right way, that mushroom will grow back and will keep coming back. And after they try that mushroom, they typically want to keep it after that because it's delicious. It's something I grew up on as a kid. We would always, our family recipe, just simple, in tomato sauce, onions, peppers, and we would can them. And then if we were hungry as kids, we'd run inside, grab a can of mushrooms, throw it on a piece of bread, and call it a day. But this is a practice that I really love, going out and foraging, because it's just another excuse to get in the woods, and you typically get a very good yield of mushrooms. Specifically, chicken of the woods is one of my favorites. We can go to the next slide here, which we're going to see processing. And this is what it's all about. You come home, you have to wash out the mushrooms because there's decaying wood and there's bugs and things like that, which, if most people see that first process, they might not want to eat it. But you go through and you clean it out thoroughly, you boil it, and then you break it down and you really get to see how much you've yielded. And my daughter loves this part. This is a part where she's hands-on because you don't need a knife or anything like that. So it's good for little kids to be able to come in and pick and peel the mushrooms apart. We can go to the next slide. This is a little hen of the woods, and these mushrooms like to grow on hardwoods. You're not going to find a hen of the woods or a chicken of the woods growing in any pine groves or anything like that. They really like the oak groves. So looking for the hardwoods and knowing where your hardwoods are in your local forest really give you a cheat code on where to go look for these mushrooms, because that's where they're going to want to sprout up. We can go to the next slide. Here we have a coral mushroom, which is a mushroom that I recently started harvesting in the past 3 or 4 years. And, as a kid, the main ones I would harvest were chicken and hens. But as I got older, wanting to try more of what, the land has to offer, because here in New England, we're extremely spoiled, especially in the southeastern part, where my people are from, because we have the ocean, the sea, which is full and abundant with life. And then the forests are full with, like we saw earlier, deer, turkeys, squirrels, rabbits, mushrooms. And I always say that if you take the time to learn this land that we live on here in our region, you could never starve. It's really quite abundant. We can go to the next slide. Here is a picture with my daughter, and we are actually at a cranberry bog near our reservation in Rhode Island. And this is a place where we go harvest cranberries in the fall. And one of my daughter's favorites, she likes to make cranberry sauce out of them. But, these berries are very important for us because these berries are, removing toxins from our bodies. These berries are, they say cranberries also help thicken your blood to get you ready for winter. So it's a gift from Creator to, help us prepare our bodies for, that cold season that's coming up ahead. And oral traditions are huge. And it's something that we continue to pass down, and it's completely necessary, because I always tell people, I have it easy coming up in this generation because of the sacrifices of my people. I'm able to freely speak my native tongue. I'm able to travel my homelands and harvest and hunt and gather. My ancestors were forbidden to do so and persecuted if they were doing that. So I always feel grateful for the opportunity I have because of the sacrifice of my ancestors. We can go to the next slide. There's a harvest of our cranberries here. So it's always fun. We always see who can pick the most. We each have little pails, and then we all combine them at the end. And my daughter will eat 2 for every 1 that she puts in the pail. So sometimes we're negative by the end of the trip, but That's all part of the game. I swear she can pick a blueberry bush clean and not have any in her basket. All right, we can go to the next slide. Aha, the Sugar Shack. The Sugar Shack, that's this time of year. We're getting out of the sugaring season now with the weather warming up. But, you know, when we're tapping our maple trees, which we've been doing for thousands of years, when we're harvesting that sugar water, it's a fun time of year. And this is a processing plant on reservation that has been in the community for years and years and years. And it's headed by one of my family members, Jeremy Whipple. And this initiative is growing and getting better year after year. And we're set up pretty nice right now. We just set up a new building that you can't see in this picture now, but it's our processing and bottling building. And we're making maple syrup, of course. We're making maple cream, maple sugars, maple candies. And, you know, it's really hard to beat, you know, fresh syrup. And my kids swear by it now. We have the little bottles at the house, and I have a couple big ones. And the little bottles, like, always catch my daughter in the cabinet drinking it like it's a juice box. We can go to the next slide. Here's a picture of some of the bottling, and it's a beautiful thing because we're reconnecting slowly but with you know, things our people have been doing, and we're getting back to more traditional ways of life. So this syrup, one thing I love about it is my tribe owns Foxwoods Resort Casino, and if you're to go to Foxwoods and order a stack of pancakes in the morning, the syrup you're going to have with it comes from the res. Just another picture of the bottling. So we've taken a lot of time in the past few years to really, you know, nurture our maple groves. So clearing out other trees so that our maple forest can really thrive. We're looking to do more with our forestry plan on taking out some of this underbrush, because our forests in New England, and specifically in our areas, are really overgrown with underbrush, which has affected the habitat for different animals. But we're looking to do controlled burns, just like our ancestors used to do, to keep, you know, the land fertile as well. And sometimes you have to take away for things to come back even.
Nakai, I believe we lost you again. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can hear you now if you want to proceed.
Yeah. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Aha. So now we're getting into these cold months, and this year we kind of really got a good winter again. We've had some weak winters in the past couple of years, and this winter let us know that we can still get these winters here. And ice fishing is something that really brings the community together. We typically go in big groups, and, you know, we bring our foods out. We bring our big cases of hot chocolate. And this is what it's all about. This is what I'm going to continue to stress throughout this talk is, you know, involving the little ones, bringing the little ones in, because like I mentioned, they're the next stewards. Getting them to fall in love with, you know, the land and the water, and being able to, you know, stick a line in the water with a hook on it and bring home dinner is a beautiful thing. And that's teaching them to provide for themselves. And in turn, it's going to be beautiful for them. In the next slide, which we're going to go to, you'll see our harvest for the day. Perch are like prize fish that we like to go for when we go ice fishing. But here are a bunch of bass, and typically we'll take them and smoke them. And that's the go-to for bass, because like I said, we're spoiled here. So freshwater fish, my favorites are trout and eel, but saltwater is my go-to for fish for sure. We'll go to the next slide now. You know, in this case, we're harvesting cattails. So if you go to the cattail stalks underneath the ground where they're all connected, you can get to that centerpiece, which has a very similar taste to a cucumber, and harvest that. It's a great resource that you can harvest year round. And cattails have just an abundance of uses, so much so that Syracuse actually looked into what it would take to mass produce cattail. But it's a resource that our people have used for thousands of years. And of course we use for food, but we also use the reeds for mats to cover our homes traditionally in the summer months, as they're naturally waterproofing, and then they dry out and let a natural airflow through into the homes. So we can go to the next slide now. Spring. Spring is one of my favorite times of the year. We're getting there now. And it's the new year for us, because life is coming back, and spring is a time where we're eager to get out and get out of our winter blues and, you know, shake the cold out of our bones. And a day like today is a prime example of that. You know, where we're finally getting that peak at that nice warm weather and being able to go outside and run around and soak up that sun. And in this picture, the crop it's showing, of course, is corn, which is one of the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, which we traditionally grew together, companion planting, because together they help yield bigger, healthier crops. Corn grows on a stalk, beans grow on a vine. They'll wrap around that corn stalk. And beans actually put nitrogen into the soil when they grow, and corn needs a very nitrogen-enriched soil to grow. And squash has a big leaf. It blocks out the sun. It keeps the soil moist longer. You don't have to go in there and weed as much. And together they provide a very nutritious and healthy meal that we're able to sustain ourselves on. And my daughter is all about the three sisters right now. That's everything she wants to talk about. She's ready to plant her garden. And I'm like, almost a little bit longer. We can go to the next slide. So in the spring, we focus a lot on fishing. Rivers, springtime is when traditionally in the state, fishing season will open. So they'll have your stocked trout. Traditionally, the only trout that we would have in our waters were brook trout, red spots, and they've introduced rainbow trouts and brown trout throughout the year. But we spend a lot of time harvesting these trout. And again, go-to way for trout for me is to smoke it. Pretty much with any freshwater fish, that's my main method. And we spend a lot of time on the rivers. And this is also the time of year, past couple of weeks, where the herring are starting to run up our streams and our rivers. And we're able to harvest them to, of course, provide nutrients for ourselves, but we also put them back into the land to prep our gardens for the year. We can go to the next slide. One of my favorites. This is a secret spot that, you know, I can't let too many Narragansetts see, because they might know from this background, so I'm kind of shaking a little bit, but this is one of my go-tos. And rainbow trout, of course, it's not a indigenous species to our area, and it's been introduced, but it's a great fish to get younger generations involved in being in the outdoors. It's a fish that's relatively easy to catch, and it's one of the better tasting freshwater fish, and it's a beautiful fish. We can go to the next slide now. And you can see our blueback herring. This fish is amazing. There's not much else I can say about it other than it's amazing to see, you know, the journey that this fish takes to survive. And, you know, the Mashpee Wampanoag people and the Aquinnah Wampanoag people having the ability to harvest these fish exclusively is a beautiful thing, because the resource, and, you know, once these fish start to run up our streams, it's like, yep, spring is coming back around, things are picking back up, and it's always a great sign. And they migrate in massive numbers. And, you know, watching these younger kids go out with their families and take a net and be able to scoop up a net full of fish and put them in a bucket to bring home is a beautiful sight to see. And this is one of my favorite animals. And the roe that we harvest from this is my favorite. And I'm a chef by fun and hobby, and I've been working on a pretty cool recipe for some herring sashimi with the roe, and be on the lookout, guys. Next slide. Tautog, blackfish. There's very few fish that I'll put above it. I'll say that. It's a great fish. The season is open for them now. They love rocky bottomed areas. Like you can see behind me, I'm in Jamestown, Rhode Island, and very rocky. There's a lot of divots, and these fish love to eat green crabs. So their teeth kind of look like human teeth because they crush and break through shell. And this one I speared, but this is a fish that is, I just can't speak highly enough about it. And my kids love it. It's the fish that everyone would love because it's that white flaky meat. It works good in a ceviche. It works good in any way you really want to cook it. And spearfishing is one of my favorite ways to go about it because I like the challenge of, harvesting an animal in its natural habitat and where it is. And, getting in that water and having to hold your breath and having, the ocean humble you the whole time because the waves are kicking your butt and the currents, and you're really working. After a day of spearfishing, you always feel very humbled and rewarded because it's really quite the task. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, more on the water. So I have a funny story about going on the water. We were going out fishing and we were heading out past Block Island, and we were going to fish for mahi and tuna. And typically before I get on a boat, I'll always leave my tobacco behind and say, give my thanks and ask for safe travels, because the water can look like this. It can look flat like glass, or it can be extremely powerful and rough. And that day I didn't do it. And I was sitting on the front of the boat as we were going out past Block Island, and it was pretty choppy out. And I got flung up in the air and I came down and I landed on my butt, and I felt like I broke my tailbone and I was hurting. And I was like, sheesh, I forgot to leave tobacco behind. And, what am I doing? So I did it. And a few minutes later, dolphins started to jump at the boat. And I knew that, all right, I was back in line with Pompagussit, because the spirit of the was not messing with me that day. We'll go to the next slide. Blue crabs. Can't say enough about blue crabs. We go with net most of the time. I know a lot of people like to go with chicken thighs and chicken necks and things like that. But I put this basket right on my back and head out and walk in by foot and scoop them with a net. And this is something I've been doing since I was a kid. This was actually my very first job, in quotation marks, as a kid, was going in Charlestown, Rhode Island, and catching blue crabs, and people would buy blue crabs from me. And that was, my little way to provide. And, going out with my grandparents and walking the coves and walking the water looking for these crabs was always, some of the highlights of my summers. And, once the blue crabs come in the water, it's time to go swim. The water's warm. It's to a temp where you'll like it. If the blue crabs like it, then you'll like it. And another thing about blue crabs is you always got to watch your fingers. They have an attitude. They definitely have an attitude. And when I'm quail hogging, sometimes the blue crabs get me, and that's my least favorite part about quail hogging. And my daughter's always like, oh, a crab, and then jumps on my back. And then you have to float in the water a little bit and let it pass and dig back into the deep, muddy water. Next slide. and right on track. The Puckwahog, just an amazing resource. This basket like this will go through in my house extremely fast. Have it be through chowder or eaten raw, but you know, it's just rewarding. This past year, we were able to take a group of tribal kids and elders out to a spot that we like to go quail hogging, and we had 30, 40 family members in the water quail hogging together, and it was a beautiful sight, because it doesn't happen often. For everyone, and it's a new experience for, you know, introducing it to other people and seeing, you know, how simple it is, showing them, you look, you can drive here, bring a basket and go in the water, and you can come back with dinner. And it was really nice to do that, especially for some of my cousins who are a little bit more finicky about digging in the mud and doing all this. It was fun to watch, but just a beautiful experience. And then, of course, you know, from the shell, it has really intertwined with my people's life. You know, using this shell to create beads. And there was a time in history where, you know, a strand about 6 feet long, white beads coming from the quail in the Atlantic whelk was the price of a Pequot person, was the price of an indigenous person, and a half fathom the price of a child. And, you know, for us, this being a gift from creator, and, you know, us using it in ceremony, and it's really the greatest gift we can give one another, to then European contact, and it being turned into, you know, a medium of monetary value, which, you know, from an indigenous perspective was never the case for us. But when the Dutch and the English are arriving and the beaver fur trade is going on, which I call the first gold rush of North America, you know, transforming the shell into something completely different in from their point of view. And, you know, seeing today, which it's a beautiful thing, all of our wampum makers today in all of our sister tribes and communities, seeing the evolution of wampum work today, it's beautiful to see, because this is the heart territory of that quail hog shell and these wampum beads that are being created. You can go to the next slide. Aha, a bunch of bluefish and striper. Just some of the best fish around. We go out and we stand on the Charlestown Breachway, and we'll go out there in the middle of the night and we'll fish all the way until the sun comes up. And if we're lucky, we'll have a harvest like this where we're able to, you know, provide fresh seafood for our family. And, you know, as a Pequot person, as a Narragansett person, we thrive by the coast. We are coastal people. We're Eastern Woodland people, but we have that coastal ties that, you know, differentiate us from other Eastern Woodland communities. And seafood and fresh fish like this just makes my soul happy. We can go to the next slide. I think it's going to be more striper. So this time of year, the striper are migrating back in. There are holdovers who stay throughout the year, but our bigger striped bass are going to be making their ways into our water. It's a fun time of year to get out and try to catch some of the early ones. This is typically the time of year where I start to get back in the water and start trying to get after striped bass. Just about, I want to say this past weekend, some of my family members put up a bunch of pictures of striper on Facebook that they caught, and it made me get the itch all over again and want to get back out there. But yeah, just an amazing fish. It's really the sporting fish of New England for us, other than tuna. People like to come to the Cape Cod Canal and it'll line up. So we can go to the next slide. I'm going to wrap up here so we can get into questions. But this is a picture of me when I was a kid. And I'm, like I mentioned before, I'm thankful for my father, for my mother, my aunts and uncles and family members who, you know, kept me involved and made this a way of life. This wasn't just something we did every now and then. This is something that we did frequently. This is something that was regular for me, and it's been something that now I pass down to my children, and it's something that my family practices as a whole. I really encourage anyone who, has interest in this, or, a love for the woods and the sea, the waters, to get out there and, keep practicing that, but also, bring the younger generations. It's hard today with technology and dragging them out of bed, but, showing what you can make from it, and, spending that time out there is irreplaceable. And, teaching them to be stewards for the next generations is the ultimate goal. And I appreciate everyone tuning in today, and I look forward to any questions that you all might have.
I think that this is a wonderful note to end on, and hopefully it inspires folks to go and make dinner.
Yes.
So I just want to say a huge Katapatash thank you very much, Nakai, for joining us this evening. And Katapatanamu, thank you all, everyone, for joining us and joining Nakai. Nakai, is there a social media handle that we can follow you on about your subsistence work?
Yes. On Instagram, I have a page, Chef Kai Clearwater, which I can put in the chat if you'd like.
That would be great. Thank you. And just a reminder, this program is recorded. So if you want to catch the recording, or you want to tell your friends and family about it, it will pop up on the YouTube channel, the Half an Hour from Museum YouTube channel, within a few days. And I put the link right into the chat as well. Okay, so at Chef Kai Clearwater, that's your Instagram. So everybody go follow.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very much, Nakai. Thank you, Hannah from Media Services. And I hope you all have a delicious dinner. We hope to see you for our last and final program with Makana Kushi on on April 27th for lei making. We hope to see you again for future Gather, Make, Sustain programs next year.
Thank you, Nakai.
Thank you.